It's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company. Welcome to this month's LinkedIn Live. And I will be getting to our guest in just a moment. It is Russel Wohlwerth, who's come on the Just Ask Jody Live LinkedIn Live event this is the third year in a row. I'm so grateful to him. For those of you who don't know who Russel is, he is an agency search consultant, an agency relations consultant. And, I think having the access to the insights and impressions of search consultants is so valuable to agencies because they provide us with kind of a view into where the clients or where marketers are these days, what's important to them, what's on their minds. And so we're going to have a really productive conversation. But first, I just wanted to remind you guys that coming up, I have got a masterclass for annual planning for your new business annual plan. Let me just go ahead and get that information up there. So this is also the third year in a row I've done this. It's called the New Business Blueprint. It is a series of 3 one-hour sessions, 3 consecutive Wednesdays in a row. And our goal is to help you put together a simple yet comprehensive annual plan for business development, for next year's business development plan. But also one that's going to get you out of the planning mode and into the action mode. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that agencies get way bogged down on planning and then nothing ever gets done. So let's get you out of that unproductive habit and get you a plan that you're really going to, that's really going to be useful to you. You can find more information at thesuttercompany.com/new-business-blueprint. And this is also, by the way, the last week of Advantage pricing. Next week, the price goes up. So take advantage of that and come join us. All right. So let me bring Russel Wohlwerth onto the stream with me. Hello there, Russel.
Hello, Jody.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
And thank you so much also for working this into your schedule. I know you've been quite busy. And so thank you everyone who is listening live to this or watching live for putting up with the 2-hour delay from the original, or 2.5-hour delay, whatever it might have been. And also for those who are watching us live, please do submit questions and comments. I am alone today. I do not have my trusty teammate, Megan, who normally is in the background looking at the comments and making sure that I see them, but I'm going to keep my eyes peeled. So please do contribute so that we can have a really interactive discussion with Russel. So how are things going there, Russel?
It's busy. I'm glad to be busy because I have to tell you, I talked to a lot of agencies throughout the year. And for most agencies, this has not been a great new business year. For some, it's been good, but for the most part, there haven't been the opportunities. There's less AOR assignments, and a distinctly curious phenomenon that a lot of agency reviews are sort of start and stop. And when I say stop, it can be many months. Some just go away into the ether, some start. Yeah. So I have to say it's a pretty chaotic environment.
So you and I do this all the time. So you and we actually came up with some questions that we wanted to address, but you're already bringing up a couple of points that we didn't really talk about, but they are so important. One is this idea of reviews of marketers deciding to put an agency into review or to search for a new agency, and then they pull back or they delay or they stop. I would love to hear more about that. I'd also love to hear a little bit about the AOR and whether it is going to make a comeback or if we're never really going to see the days of AOR. And what do we say to an agency that may approach me and say, I just don't want to do any more project work. I want to find the AOR projects. Maybe let's start with that one first.
Good luck.
You heard it here first.
It's just a sign of the times in terms of when I started doing this 25 years ago, every assignment was a big AOR assignment, and we just don't see a lot these days. Clients seem to be much more comfortable working with agencies on a project basis, have a roster of good agencies. That may or may not be good for the client. I argue we do a lot of work in agency roster management. One of the problems is the more agencies you have, the more difficult it is trying to manage the brand. And if you've got a big team, that's not a problem. But if you've got a fairly small staff team, it's really hard to stay because you're the master of the brand and you've got to keep all those agencies moving in the same direction. And, when I ask why, a lot of clients, marketers are saying it's just, I don't think we need an AOR. They're doing much more distinct projects. Seems like every client wants to put all their money into social and talk to Gen Z. So they're looking for more super specialists as opposed to somebody that can do a broad brand construction. It's not everybody, but that seems to be the trend.
Yeah. But so it's not everybody.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we have some nice AOR assignments, which are really valuable. Agencies are all over those,
It
but
looks like we might have the idea of looking for those AOR opportunities. Usually I say, look, why don't we figure out another strategy that maybe has you looking for different types of projects with different types of clients? Um, yeah, is that the right advice?
I think so, because as some agencies have told me, they said if you gave us this project, let's say 2 years ago, we wouldn't
Yeah,
have been able to accept it. But over the last 2 years, we found a way to resource and to be able to work on projects profitably.
yeah,
And I think that's clearly where the future is headed. I don't see a day where we're going to have a bunch of AOR assignments.
yes, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're saying that. Not because, well, not for the agencies that are looking for AOR assignments, but it makes me feel better. Sometimes I always felt a little bit like, wow, why can't I help the agencies find all these AOR assignments that apparently they think is out there? But really it's the case. We may have seen the end of the agency of record, at least the way that we used to know them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it just seems my personal theory is that like everything post pandemic, it just created a chaotic environment. We're seeing marketers move out of their positions at a rate that
Yeah.
it's always been high, but it seems to be happening all the time now. So it's not just agency people moving around; it's marketers moving around, all contributing to this chaotic mix. Which, if you're a new business person, you're probably not sleeping too well.
Right. Yeah. Well, and any new business people who are watching us live today would love to hear your comments. How are you sleeping these days? Yeah. So I think probably one of the things that's keeping them up at night too is wondering, well, what are marketers looking for? And I know this is kind of a big, broad question, but do you have any top line impressions about what's most important? What's on the minds of marketers these days as they are thinking about how outside agencies can help them with their business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at anything the ANA has done lately, and they hit the center of the bullseye. Companies aren't growing, but they're looking for marketing agencies to help them grow, and that lack of growth is really really difficult. You look at some of the
Yeah.
largest companies in America, and their growth has been snail like. One of the other things we're running into is we're in this age of transition from the old world to the new world, modern marketing, AI, all that stuff. It's tremendously difficult to get your hands around that, and that's threatening a lot of marketers. Where do we go? Should we put all of our money into social? And I personally like when we have a lot of clients who are very open to different solutions. I think that social media is not a panacea. So
Yeah.
um, the and marketers are having beyond the growth, there's just so many different ways to shop and online shopping and what
Yeah.
you do with your offline shopping. We're just transitioning to this new world, and like most transitions, it's a pretty bumpy ride.
Hmm. Yeah. So does that mean that any agency that can potentially make that ride less bumpy is going to be of interest, is going to be worth taking a second look at?
Yeah, I think an agency that can reach out and hold that hand of the marketer and say, "Hey, it's going to be okay," and has
Yeah.
experience, doing these things, has that track record of helping clients evolve into the new world of marketing.
Yeah.
Not everything works, and it's a great experiment, but I think agencies forget the significant risk marketers are taking when they go into an agency search, because
Mhm.
they hire the wrong agency, that could lead to the end of a marketer's job. It may or it may not, but there's a lot of pressure on their shoulders as well. It's not just
Yeah.
finding a new resource. It's how is this going to help me in my career, and how is this going to help our company meet its objectives?
Yeah. Let me ask you, we also got a question that I wanna make sure I get to, but let me ask you, you mentioned the experience for agencies who have a certain amount of experience or experience in a certain area that will help a client get through some of the get through that bumpy road with as few bumps as possible. What if, AI is still a fairly new thing? Is, what if there's an agency listening to this and saying, "You know what? We have probably about as much experience in AI as anyone else. However, we've made some pretty we're willing to make some assumptions, and we're willing to offer an opinion based on our experience and get that opinion out there. We might be wrong, but we're willing to sort of figure it out with you. That is also a very vulnerable place for agencies. But is that a better strategy than just maybe sitting on the sidelines and saying, well, we don't have enough experience?
Yeah, I mean, AI is relatively new in terms of its current iteration. It's actually been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've had a single client this year not add into the questionnaire, whether it be an RFI or a chemistry meeting, or what are you doing in AI? Because it's a lot of experimentation. So I think anybody that says, oh, we've got the answer would not be credible. But I think seeing that you are experimenting and you're creating some credibility by the experiments you're running in AI. There's also a downside to AI, because on one hand, it can help you do great things, but on the other hand, the automation aspect, and marketers are also thinking, hey, this can make my agency less expensive because we're automating a lot of the processes. But it's a frequently asked question, and nobody has figured it out. And I don't think they're going to completely, but big question, and seeing a lot of interesting things, how AI can help in all different aspects, regardless of what kind of marketing agency you are.
Yeah. Laura, I promise I will get to your question, but I'm also curious to push Russell a little bit more on this. Do you have personal thoughts on where AI makes the biggest, most positive impact?
Well, we're seeing everywhere, from creative, from use of social, interpreting what's going on. It's the ability to, take in a lot of data and create an answer. We're seeing from a financial standpoint, I know we're doing stuff in finance, changing around how agencies are being compensated, as opposed to an hourly rate. AI tells us a lot of things about it. But I just saw a presentation 2 hours ago about how AI, was heavily baked into the creative product. So the worst thing to do is sit on the sidelines. We're all educating ourselves. We're taking classes. We are really trying to stay ahead of the curve as best we can. And it's hard to stay ahead of the curve on AI. But, and people are saying, oh, AI is going to, end a lot of jobs. It's going to end a lot of jobs for people who don't have AI skills, I think.
Right. Just like the automobile.
Oh, Jody has frozen momentarily.
But let me ask you, there's another question that I had, but let me put that aside because I want to go to Laura's question. Laura, who I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name because I don't want to. I want to do it justice, and it looks like it's a bit of a tricky spelling. So Laura, I hope it's okay that I just call you Laura. Her question is sort of shifting away and moving more towards the sort of dilemma, shall we say, of the full service agency. What's the most effective strategy to position a full service integrated mid-size agency to get their foot in the door for some of these specialty projects and to make a profit? So there's a lot there. Let's just maybe first focus on specialty projects, getting your foot in the door, and this idea of being kind of a more of this full service agency offering a lot. How do you then position yourself as having a specialty?
I think it's ironically the full service experience that makes you so right for projects, because it gives you this very big swath of experience. The biggest problem that agencies have with projects is they're used to working in this AOR structure, and they're used to working with whatever your minimum fee is, $1 million, $5 million, whatever, and it's just adjusting. If it was me and if it was my agency, I would offer something at a lower cost just to get the experience. If you don't have a lot of experience in projects, you may lose your shirt on the first one, but you'll understand, because, for better, for worse, that at least appears at this moment where this business is going in regard to relationships.
So sort of making a lost leader. Like if you aren't practiced in managing projects and being profitable, doing project work, then figure it out, maybe making a little less money. But in terms of positioning yourself to that client, that's really interesting that you say that a full service agency may actually be in a better position than maybe some of those niched agencies, because they just have a broader perspective.
Yeah, because I see a lot for projects. A lot of them are for specialists, but as a specialist agency, you're sort of putting yourself in a corner to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think the broad experience of being a full service agency means that you can be right for more projects. It's that broad based, business understanding and working
Yeah.
with marketers that way. So that's why I say I think it's better coming from a AOR kind of relationship or history of that.
That's really interesting. And what I would say as sort of the agency side business development person is that offers a lot of hope. But I also think that probably the messaging has to be tuned pretty tightly to make sure that the agency's not going in and saying, "Hey, but we're great because we're full service and fully integrated." You've got to find a way to say, yes for that, but here's why it matters to you, because maybe it's a certain amount of experience, or maybe the full service has allowed you to grow some specialty skills in this area. So it can't just be about, I would think, hey, we're full service so we can handle all your needs.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jody. It can't be, hey, we're a full service agency, because a client will say, well, we're looking for a project agency.
Yes.
Again, if it was me, this is where we came from, and this is where we've evolved to in terms of, being able to work on a project basis, because agencies so many times throw out all this stuff. And to me, the worst thing is when somebody wants to be in a pitch and they really don't have the capabilities. So starting out with, we're a full service agency, for a project-based assignment, you're going to get booted almost immediately. So it's how you did that evolution.
Yeah, I think that's where agencies have to be very, I guess it's a little bit mercenary, that you have to realize, like, how do I get the attention of this marketer? Well, I'm not going to get their attention by telling them that we are a fully integrated, full service, mid-size agency, because they are going to hear that about 1,000 times a day. So what do I need to do that is both true, but also a little bit different from that, is a little bit sort of touching on whatever acute feeling of pain my client might be feeling at this time, or my prospect.
Everybody has a story. Again, if you can tell the story, this is who we were and this is where the world is today. So this is how we've evolved. And, it would be great if you had a story of maybe something that evolved from a project relationship to a full service relationship. Just want to give them the confidence that you have the capabilities and understanding to do what they do, and your structure isn't holding you back.
You're talking about stories. I think storytelling is one of the most important tools in an agency's tool belt. But I think we sort of take it for granted, because agencies tend to be very good storytellers on behalf of their clients, but they also then forget how to apply the same skill to their own story.
Oh, and Jody, you are frozen again. Hopefully this is.
And it's really, it's this idea that based on what you've been through, you individually or you as the agency, what you've gone through, what's shaped you, the hard times, the good times, the triumphs, the obstacles, has set you up to be in a position to solve particular problems, to make an impact today. And so go back and take a look at that story, because really that is going to tell the client so much more. Storytelling is a very potent form of information communication. That is going to do so much more than using those broader terms like full service, experienced, et cetera.
Yeah, I think a lot of agencies make a mistake. We do this, and I'm sure every client does. We, in an RFI process, tell us about yourself. That's not an intentional misdirect, but it's like, tell us about yourself filtered through the lens of a client. So don't tell me about your family's trip to Disney World for 7 days, because that's boring.
Yeah.
What you need to do is link who you are to what that client needs. And a lot of agencies forget that, and they talk endlessly about themselves in the name of what they are fighting for. You need to equate those things back to what the marketer needs. That's the way to sell your agency, I think.
Yeah. Oh, Lisa tells me, thank you, Lisa. I've been freezing up. I know this is, I think we're a little bit doomed today with this, because I know
Oh, and there you go again, but you come back relatively quickly. I may just ask myself my own question here.
So hopefully it's not too disruptive, the technical issues. So Russell, the other question I wanted to ask you, actually among a number of questions, the cyclical nature of our business. So I think you and I have been in this long enough that we have seen cycles of holding companies versus independent agencies, back to holding companies and control, back to independent agencies. Where do you see us in the current cycle in terms of independent agencies?
Yeah, well, there's clearly, I get it. There's clearly a sense, particularly on the part of independent agencies, about this. This is much better, but we have some very large clients, and there are some very large companies that are working on a global basis, and they can't engage 100+ agencies for every country. So, so the holding company makes sense for those big scale marketers that have billings, significant billings. And I also think where I see, I'm not trying to defend holding companies, but I do think that there's a real purpose for holding companies, particularly in the world of modern marketing, where everything needs to be working together. It's very difficult to have too many pieces because everybody needs to know what the other specialty is doing. So for those big pitches, I still think, despite all the stuff I read and get in my inbox every day about the age of the holding company is dead, it's not dead. But going back to a lot of clients that are doing projects, that's where, the independence, you have lower overhead, you can move quicker. That's a virtue for independent agencies. One of the things I hate, though, is we're doing, a small pitch, and every agency talks about it, spends the first 2 pages stabbing holding companies in the back. There are no holding companies. It's a small pitch. They're all independent agencies. So it kind of makes them seem naive, given the budget.
Interesting. So I guess just to drill down on that, because that is just such a nice opportunity to kind of just peel back what's going on in a particular pitch. Is that because they don't know who else is competing and they're just assuming that holding companies are?
Well, yeah, we generally will not in a first round mention who's there for a number of reasons. But if you've got, if it's a project for $750,000 or $1 million, chances are you're not going to have a holding company in there. So you can tell, by the size, and the RFI should explain, what you're looking for. But that argument can be used. I just think for those smaller pitches, that's probably not the right place to make that argument.
So that's sort of an example of an agency, potentially a smaller agency, using a sort of a broader headline that they might use in their more general marketing messaging. We're not a holding company, and we have the advantages of an indie agency versus some of the disadvantages of the holding company. And that, I think, can be very useful for awareness building or, attracting the right types of prospects. But I think what you're also saying is that someone on the agency side is not saying, okay, hold on, here's the budget. So realistically, our holding company is going to be there. And is this and I think sometimes also maybe my advice would be let's move away from the trashing part and instead focus on your strengths. Maybe no reason why you can't still talk about being nimble, although I kind of hate that word because it's overused. But no reason why you can't talk up your own strengths, but try to do that without bashing others.
Yeah, it's like an argument they're so used to making, they can't get away from it. I think the best new business agencies are looking at this as a game of 3-dimensional chess and looking at everything in here about, let's read all the tea leaves here and what can we come up with? And again, for a small budget, to make that argument. Plus, if it wasn't mentioned, it's tough because a lot of times you get a brief, and by the way, something Jody remind me to talk about later on, something that's impacting us and agencies is there's a lot more clients running their own pitches than there are search consultants. But back to this, we like to write a good brief because we think if you don't understand what the problem is, it's really difficult to even ask what capabilities you have that are relevant if you don't know what the problem is. So hopefully in a good brief, you can sort of understand what that marketer is looking for. If it's complete with, we're never going to work with another holding company again, that's where you make the argument. But otherwise, if it's not coming up, you may want, just look very closely into what's being said.
Yeah. I think we've talked about this before, whether it's been on another LinkedIn Live. I think we have talked about another LinkedIn Live, is this idea of when you get a brief or RFP or RFI from a client, from a marketer, there's an opportunity to read between the lines. I'm always looking at what they're asking for explicitly, but usually there's some implicit request or a underlying story about what they're fearing, what they want to avoid at all costs. And sometimes agencies don't give themselves a chance to really discover what those are and respond to those strategically.
And I'd like to
Um,
add on to that, if I could, for just a second,
yeah.
that, as I said earlier, it appears for most agencies to not be a great new business environment. But if you're getting invited into something and it doesn't feel right, you're not getting, the information and stuff, you may want to save your money and avoid participating in that pitch. You can
Mhm.
always say no, one of the strongest words in new business.
Yes, exactly. And underutilized often.
Yeah.
Haley Hunter, hi Haley. So nice to see you on the stream. Haley had a question, and it is: are you seeing any changes or trends in the type of agencies that marketers are looking for? Not just a niche or niche capabilities, but size, location, independence. You and I were just sort of talking about that a little bit. And if you see shifts happening, why do you think that's happening? So another big question. But yeah, let's specifically, what are marketers looking for these days?
The bigger shift we're seeing is skills in social,
Mm,
in, most marketers are putting the vast majority, 60, 70% of their budget into digital media. But everybody wants to be in social these days. It's influencer agencies, it's social agencies, and then there's a media complement to that. Well, and also, everybody wants to talk to Gen Z. I know other people in this country exist, but it seems like everybody wants to talk to Gen Z, and
yeah.
that's a huge demand that we're getting. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that we're not seeing a lot of the AOR stuff, because you could be the AOR social agency of record, but it's very different. And most clients' briefs have that in those ingredients in there. So that's clearly where most people are looking.
Yeah. Okay. Haley, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, it's
And by the way, location, I mean, marketers are looking. We got away from this with all of the remote work, but they're still
yeah.
looking for agencies generally within like an hour or so time zone of where they're at, despite all the great things that remote work styles have given us. They still want somebody close to them, or relatively close.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because you would think that that wouldn't be as important. Is that because well, you mentioned the same time zone. Is that partly just for the ease of doing business,
Yeah,
the ability to, if
yeah,
it's 9 o'clock where they are, they know that it's either, 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock, like
yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
nearby. They're going
I
to
mean,
get someone to talk to or respond to.
yeah,
Yeah.
for a large client, it's not uncommon that an agency will shift the account group's hours if they, either have to get
Yeah.
up early or come in an hour late. Yeah, it's still, despite all the great things that remote working has given us, that's still a big issue. Working on the same time zone,
Yeah.
and at times there's been hot areas of the country. I don't see anything, right now where we got to go to Portland or Austin or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what about being with a client in person, being with marketers in person? Is that also something that's coming back? Are you seeing more agencies
Yeah,
going out to the client headquarters to spend time, or the clients going to the agencies? And is that going to start, maybe that's going to start to bring people back to work too?
it is. We don't hear it everywhere, but it's often expressed that we think that together time is great to bond the team. And while you can certainly make a good team via remote, I don't think it's nearly as strong as the
Yeah.
physical meetings. And again, that's another reason to stay close, because if you're on either end of the coast, it makes it a little bit more difficult to come for meetings often. And
Yeah.
everybody's got different regulations. As we see more and more marketers, force is not the right word, but push their workforce into being in the office more. I think we're going to see more of this
Yeah.
agency client in-person meeting phenomena happening,
Yeah.
just like it was in
Interesting.
the good old days.
Yeah, I mean, already it feels like the height of COVID was 1,000 years ago, and I think yeah, I see us moving back. I mean, I know even in my own business, I'm visiting clients a lot more, although it's a little bit more of a hybrid. I do that
Yep.
2-day workshop, and what I'm finding is it's day one is on site, day two is on Zoom, because you've sort of been able to bond with folks, and now you can sort of use the momentum of that to do some virtual work.
And the impact on the reviews has been a lot more of the reviews we're doing are hybrid, that meaning that there's usually one, if not more, meetings in person. And I always tell the client, okay, if we're going to do one in person and another virtual, my choice for the in person is always the chemistry meeting, because that not that you can't feel chemistry over video, but I think it makes a whole lot more sense to see who you click with versus getting into the finals and realizing, oh, we're doing this live and I don't like these people. It's too late.
Yeah.
The final presentations are more transactional. So I think a chemistry meeting is critical to do in person if you're going to do one in person.
Yeah, I really like to hear that from you. We are actually over time. This
Are
usually
we? Oh,
happens, and I know, yeah, I know it goes by so quickly. I do want to
oh, freeze.
looks like we're freezing again. No, we're back. Okay, phew. So, Lisa, I know you had us a quick a question about changes to the RFP, RFI, and I think, Russell, you're a professional, so I know you react to what the marketers need and what they're asking for. But I think what Lisa's sort of asking is how have you seen the RFP, RFI change, and is it changing enough?
That is a great question, by the way. So we're changing the RFP. I will show clients, when we're having a meeting, the front cover of the price of the pitch, the joint study by the 4As and the ANA, and say, look, this is expensive. It's not just expensive for agencies, it's expensive for you. So we're trying to find ways to cut. We explain, unless you want to pay a lot of money, a lot of clients, believe it or not, still pay stipends for agencies, but it's still, it's more an acknowledgement of all the work you put in. It doesn't necessarily make you whole. But we are consciously trying to cut down things, maybe one less step in there, always conscious of the tremendous amount of money that impacts both partners.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, you made mention there of the ANA 4A's cost of the pitch study, which I'll make sure that we include a link in the comments. Probably most of the folks who are here today and are listening to this recording are familiar with it. But if you're not, it's really worth taking a look at to understand what agencies are spending, what we're spending on pitches. And I thought there's some interesting things too about the incumbents versus non-incumbents. I actually thought it held some hope for incumbent agencies.
We believe that report is another reason why clients are doing more reviews. You don't need a PhD in economics to hold an agency review, but the reality is it takes a lot of time if you do it right. Most clients don't have the time.
Yeah. Russell, I don't want to take any more time of yours because I know you've been so generous, but I guess as a parting comment, anything that, any last word, at least for as far as this LinkedIn Live goes, that you want to impart, any mistakes that you see agencies making that you really wish they would address and stop making?
Yeah, ironically, I'm giving a talk on this on Friday, and it's about your credentials deck. And I know it's hard to do like a generic credentials deck, but I can't understand. We get so many decks a year from agencies. We know, we don't know. I'd say about 75% of those decks, I have no idea what the agency does for a living. They talk about this and that, and they're fighting in the name of this, and they're all about freedom or whatever. And it's like, well, what do you do for a living? And it seems like agencies are getting more similar than they are diverse. Everybody's an integrated marketing agency that is digital at the core. And I'll tell you, my hint is, can you show me a pie chart and show me where your revenue, I don't want to know what your revenue is. I want to know the percentage. Where are the big boxcar numbers? And that tells me what kind of agency you are, because every agency seems like has the same slide about this is what we do. We do everything. And that's really hard nobody has ever asked us for an agency that does everything.
And by the way, you also just pointed out a really great example of an implicit desire to see information in an explicit request. So explicit request is show me a breakdown of your billings. And what you want to see in a more unvarnished way is like, are you really truly as digital at the core as you say you are in the opening paragraph of this RFI response? Yeah. So agencies, I think, you really have to think about that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that's the role of agencies that have a business development professional to go back to their management and say, hey, look, we are not telling a coherent story. What is the story we want to tell? And can we back that up? And for smaller agencies that maybe don't have that, if you're the CEO or one of the owners or our founding partner, to be really honest with yourself about the story that you're telling, and does it make sense? Is it logical? So, as well as compelling. Russell, thank you so much. I look forward to having you on again.
Pleasure, Jody. Jody and I get into these long conversations on the phone or video, and they go, she's like, so we enjoy talking with one another. But thank you. I am honored, and I appreciate your invitation.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to work, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.